Welcome, everybody. I am Rick DiClemente. This is Astrology Unplugged, episode 144, I think. If you're not seeing it live, it's playing on YouTube. If you'd like to join us, like Carolyn is doing this time, just go to YouTube, go to Google, type in Astrology Unplugged, and it'll take you to the link. We are always on at 8 o'clock, 8 to 9 Eastern on Thursdays. We are able, us live people are able to send chats to each other, but unfortunately, I don't have the time to respond to your chats because I'm busy trying to maintain the buttons and do the show. So if you would like to chat with each other, that's perfectly fine. And the people watching on YouTube do not see your name or your chat messages. Okay, the long dreaded do it all by hand. And when I used to teach astrology, I started teaching in 1982. You had to buy 3 books. The main one, the Ephemeris. Okay, the Ephemeris was printed. There are different types. There are ephemerized printed by the Rosicrucians. This Ephemeris was produced by Neil Michelson, who has since passed on, and he started in the early 60s. He prints this book. This is the whole 20th century. This tells you precisely where the planets were every day, every minute for noon, Greenwich, England. Greenwich is a suburb of London. You can get the book for noon or get the book for midnight. The problem I have with midnight is you're always looking at where the planets were at 7 p.m. on the night before. With a noon ephemeris, you're always looking at where the planets were at 7 a.m. because it's Greenwich time, 5 hours different. This book, I'm going to do close-ups later. This book shows you where all the planets were at what time. And it's a really good thing to have even when you're computerized, because you can see straight across the line, see how they're all moving at once, when they go retrograde, when that little rascal Mercury is going to go retrograde like it's going to go with us in a couple weeks. Then you get to buy this book called the American World Atlas. And there are several types. This has every city in the United States, what the longitude is, what the latitude is, and what the time difference is exactly between your town and Greenwich, England. It's going to get a whole lot worse, Barbara. All right. Then you had to buy Dalton's Table of Houses. Well, there are other table of houses. This thin book helped you determine where the house cusps were when you built the chart. You got a cusp, you got the second house going from 2 Leo to 29 Leo. This book is how you do it. So with your mathematics and these 3 books, you can calculate a chart down to the nth degree. In the old days, I didn't worry about it because I was doing so many charts. I would get it down within 1 degree for most readings. If I were doing progressions, then you have to get it really exact. And what we did was unheard of. We'd send $2 away on a postcard to ACS. Hi, Marcia Bud. The ACS was the Astro Computing Services, which was Neil Michelson's original business. He was not an astrologer. He was a mathematician. And they would send you back your chart. And it's interesting because I had a flood in 2006. I lost all my astrology books, not my reference books, but all these books. I lost them all in the flood. I lost hundreds of charts. And the only thing that survived that flood to this day is a letter back from Neil Michelson when I tried to get a job with him because I knew computers and I knew astrology. But he was already booked up. I don't want you to try to memorize the steps, but we'll just understand with a philosophy behind it. What we're going to do, this book gives you the sidereal time for any date for any year. And every sidereal time for any year at spring, the sidereal time is always 0 hours, 0 minutes, 0 seconds. It resets. Spring is always 0, 0, 0. So someday I'll really blow your minds because astrology in the West has nothing to do with the constellations. It has to do with how far you have traveled in time from the moment of spring. That's why the Western astrology chart is different than the astronomer's chart. The astronomers line you up with the constellations. And that's why they tell us we're wrong. Ooh, but we're not wrong because it's a symbolic science. And we got Pluto and they don't. So how about that? You go tell Pluto it doesn't count anymore. I'll just wait here and see how you do when you come back. All right, I'm going to really take my time because it's complicated. All right. There used to be a little store in Pittsburgh and Shadyside called the Sign of Aquarius, run by an Aquarian woman. And all my students had to buy these 3 books to do the class. So I'd start with 20 people, and week number 9, I'd have 3 people. And that's okay, because I'm going to kind of rub it in and be a little malicious tonight, because you show you how us old people paid our dues. All right. So the first thing you do, you need your birth time. You write down your birth date on a piece of paper, and you write down your birth time. Now, let's say you were born. I've got an example on a close-up. Let's say you were born February 1st in 1952. All right. All right. Let me get it on the screen. Here we go. I'm taking my time with this because this is very important. This is what a page looks like in February of 52. Every page is like this. Here's the sidereal time given to you. The sidereal time is always 0, 0, 0 on the day of spring, March 20th, March 21st. Every day, the difference between 2 days is 3 minutes and 56 seconds, approximately. Every day, in other words, the sun goes 3 minutes and 56 seconds away around the circle, which is 1/360th. Oh, by the way, we're going to have Linda Hill with us, joining us November 21st, and she's the one who wrote the new book on the Sabian symbols, which is the meaning of each degree, and it's marvelous. It's not like the old one. It's just excellent. Anyhow, when we get further along, I'll tell you about our upcoming guest. So we see, now remember, you cannot have an ephemeris for every city in the planet, so you're given an ephemeris that's accurate for Greenwich, England. So at noon on February 1st, the moon was at 25 degrees of Aries, 43 minutes and 12 seconds. And the moon moves 13 degrees a day. At midnight, 0 hours, the moon was at 19 of Aries, 5 degrees, 9 minutes. So you can see in half a day, the moon moved about 6 degrees. And in 1 day, the moon moves about 13 degrees. Okay, the North Node, we're not going to talk about that. Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. And there's a small reference at the bottom of the page to Chiron, because Chiron had just come around in 1977. Mercury was at 2732 of Capricorn. Here it goes into Aquarius. Here it goes into Pisces. So that's the advantage of having this grid. You can look at the whole month and see here's Mercury in Capricorn. Here's when it goes into Pisces, and it shows you the retrograde tables and everything. You'll notice here, Uranus is retrograde here with the R, moving backward. Neptune is retrograde. Pluto is retrograde. It's very normal. So 3 of the planets are going retrograde during the winter. Where's Venus, where's Mars, where's Jupiter, where's Saturn, etc., etc., etc. So the main thing at first, this is where you're going to come back to when you get, the first thing you're going to do, you're going to draw the chart, get the ascendant, get the midheaven, get the degrees of all your houses. You're going to determine the 12 houses. Then you're going to do the planets. So if I were to show you an example, make sure you get this in your mind. All right, let's take a look here. Today's chart. Here's the exact moment right now. If a baby's born right now and starts crying, this is the chart the child has in Pittsburgh. All right. So the first thing you do is you determine where does that house start, where does that house start, and then where does that house start, where does that house start. If you watch this for a minute or two, this will change. Okay? Wrong one. This one, okay. You can actually sit there and watch these numbers change. When you teach a class, you can watch the whole thing change. Okay, and the houses are not the same as the signs. So to show you that better, to give you a better example of what I mean by the houses and the signs, let's go to Europe 4. Okay, now, let me repaint your screen. I always get it on my screen, then I have to repaint it for you. Okay, so you see the moon is going through the sign of Gemini, but it's in this house. All planets are in a sign. They're also in a house. A planet represents an energy. The sign it's in is the type of energy. The house it's in is where that energy gets expressed into the fields of life. Now, during the day, this whole wheel turns completely around once. Not the zodiac, well, the zodiac, the whole wheel spins. But the moon is, for example, the moon will take the moon will take 28 hours to go through the sign of Gemini. The sun will take 30 days to go from 0 Libra to the end of Libra. Pluto will take 15 years to go from 0 Capricorn to the end of Capricorn, etc. So the planets moving through the zodiac is completely different than the planets going through the houses, which is why the 1967 song about Aquarius is totally wrong. When the moon is in the 7th house, well, that's once a day. Once a day, the moon is over here in the 7th house. Here's your houses. See the numbers? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So, if I were born, I'm going to move it by hours. Okay, this child was just born at 8:16 tonight. If the child wasn't born for another hour, boom, chart change. Another hour, boom. Another hour, boom. Okay, notice how the sun is getting dark now. We're at midnight, 16 minutes after midnight, the sun's at the bottom of the chart. All people in history, no matter where, if you're born near midnight, the sun is at the bottom of the chart. If you're born near noon, the sun is up near the top. The chart is tilted. Here's your 10th house right here. This is actually what's above you. And the reason the chart looks a little crooked is because during certain seasons, the axis is tilting away or towards the sun. So noon people are born with the sun near the top. People that are rising, the sun is rising, it's over here. This is noon. This is sunset. This is the sun at its nadir or the midnight. The bottom, the top, this is west. In astrology, this is east. This is west. So in Western astrology, it's backward. This is the east. This is the west. All people born at sunrise, the sun is around here. It stays in this area for about 2 hours. Then about 7, 8, 9 o'clock in the morning, it comes up through the 11th house. Then about 11, 12, 1 o'clock, it comes up through the top of the chart. So that's why you have to determine first how the house structure is. I'm going to explain to you more about the houses in a few minutes. So you start off by going to the ephemeris. We're just going to make up a story here. All right. You make up a story. This child was born at February the 1st in 1952. The sidereal time, you write this factor down, 20, 42, 36. Okay? Remember, at the exact moment of halfway through the year, or June 21st, this sidereal time would be 12:00. It's 0:00 in spring. In the winter, it's 18:18:18. So right before spring, we're approaching spring. You can see the numbers are approaching. They're approaching 24. When it gets to 24, that will be the night before spring. All right. All right, let me get this straight here. My computers give me a hard time. Oh, well. All right. So you get a piece of paper, and I used to have a nice cheat sheet that showed you how to fill in the blanks each step. You write down the sidereal time for the day of your birth. Now that sidereal time is always, if you got the noon book or you got the midnight book, we'll work with noon. That sidereal time is always what the sidereal time is at noon at the day of your birth. Now what the sidereal time is, I'm not going to get complex with you because it gets confusing. It's star time. That's what sidereal means. All that it means is how are we in relationship to the sun? We're looking at the sun. Watch this. I'm going through Capricorn, and you see the sun going through Capricorn. Am I facing it out my left ear? Am I facing it out my right ear? Am I facing it behind me? So that's all the sidereal time is. It shows you how you are adjusted in space. Now, the sidereal time is given to you, and once you get it calculated for the city of birth, at the time of your birth, at the longitude of your birth, at the latitude of your birth, then we will know exactly how your chart is set up in those 12 pieces of the pie called the houses. I'm getting tired already. So, let's say this child is born at 10 minutes after 8 o'clock in the morning. 10 after 8 in the morning. And we're going to do Pittsburgh since that's where this show emanates from. You're born in Pittsburgh. It's 10 minutes after 8. You call your buddy in England and say, it's a boy, it's a boy. What time is it there? Well, chap, old chap, it's 10 minutes after 1. Congratulations. So the first thing you do is you figure out what time is it in England when a child is born. You add the time zone. That's all there is to it. So in actuality, what we're going to really do is we're going to take your time of birth, we're going to add the time difference by zone to find out what the time was in England. And here's the trick. When you're in Pittsburgh, that's not the same as somebody born in Philadelphia. This square is perfect for Pennsylvania. Pittsburgh's here, Philadelphia's here. So we know we're 5 hours different than England, but it's not exactly 5 hours, is it? Because the distance between England and Philadelphia is quite different than England and Pittsburgh. So you take that birth time of 8:10, and you got to find the interval. What the interval is how much time has gone on past noon or before noon. So if the child is born in Pittsburgh at 10 minutes after 8, it's really 1:10 in the afternoon there, or military time is 13:10. And you have much use for military doing it this way. It makes a lot more sense. So it's 13:10 when the child is born. That is the Greenwich Mean Time. No, that is the Greenwich sidereal time at the time of birth. Okay, that's all that is. If I were born, let's see. If I were born at 4 o'clock in the morning, it would be 9 a.m. over there. So the interval would be a -3 hours. Because it's got to go another 3 hours till we get to noon, which is the known factor. We only know what the sidereal time is for Greenwich, England, at that latitude and at that longitude. Okay? So in my case, I got a little rectangle on my piece of paper. It's got a plus 1:10. Because I have gone, I'm born at 8:10. It's really 10 minutes after noon. I have gone 1 hour and 10 minutes past noon their time. And the sidereal time, when you get it all figured out, tells you everything you need. Then there's a little step, and I'm not going to confuse you about it now, and there are different ways to arrive at it. We modify that 1:10 a little bit because of imperfections in the ellipse that the Earth takes. The Earth is not really round. It doesn't really go on a perfectly round orbit. So we have to modify that 1/10 and add to it about 1/6 of itself. So instead of saying 1:10, we end up with about 1/26. Something like that. I'm not going to bore you with it. Just know that once you get the interval, you have to modify it. And there are many places on the web that will tell you step by step by step how you do it. They'll give you examples. They'll have maps. There are wonderful tools out there. You can get books that explain each step by step. So you've got the box now. And for our purposes, let's say the box now says 1:20. You've gone 1:20 past sidereal time, but past noon. Okay, so now that you're plus 1:10, you're going to add it to the sidereal time at noon. So now you know what is the sidereal time at the time the child's born. Not for noon that day, you're still in London, but you now know what the sidereal time is 1 hour and 10 minutes later. So you've got that altered, you got the interval, and you've got it modified. Now the only thing left is you go, the green book is where you'll tilt. This is the blue book. You go into this book. This book has every city in the United States. It's got the time difference between you and England, longitude, latitude, county, because there are many places in the state named the same. That's all you use it for. So when we went to England, we knew we're 5 hours different. But in Pittsburgh, what does it say for Pittsburgh? 5:15 something. I'm going to go over this several times slowly, so don't worry, you'll get it. And Marcia's saying, oh, by God, I'm glad I'm doing this while computers are here. Boy, I'll tell you what, once you're a teacher, you cannot get people to go back to paper. They will not do it. And I'm going to tell you later on why it's a real good idea. Learning it by paper is really good. All right. Pittsburgh is 5 hours, 20 minutes, and 4 seconds. Okay? Philadelphia, 5:20 for Pittsburgh. Philadelphia, is 5:00. So we got 20 minutes time difference between us and Philadelphia. So you take your time you're born, you adjust it 5 hours, and when you come back, you adjust it exactly to your city. I wasn't born in Philly. I was born in Wheeling. Okay, but let's say we're born in Philadelphia, Pittsburgh. So you've taken your 8:10. You went to call to people in England. They said it's 1:10 in the afternoon. We've adjusted that 1:10 a little bit. We're given the sidereal time from the ephemeris for that day of birth. We start with that figure. We add that interval or we subtract that interval. Now we know what is the sidereal time in England at the exact time of birth. Different longitude, different latitude, but we got the longitude solved. We come back at the end and we subtract from that figure 5 hours, 20 minutes, and 4 seconds for Pittsburgh, or 5:00 for Philadelphia. What you find is Pittsburgh is on the 80th parallel and Philadelphia is on the 75th parallel. The difference in the globe. Watch the vertical lines in the globe. Philadelphia is 75. Pittsburgh is 80. So it's 5 degrees difference on that globe. So you got the birth time. You go to England. You modify, you subtract the exact distance. Now you come back to Pittsburgh. Now you've got the accurate sidereal time, but you're not certain what the latitude is. Could have been born in Georgia. Could have been born in northern Canada. Same time, same zone. The stars look different on your chart if you're in northern Canada. And versus if you're born at the 40th parallel. So I'll show you an example. Let's take this chart, and I'm going to modify this chart. All right. I'm going to go to charts. No, I don't want that. I don't want that. I want to go, bear with me. Okay, wheel style, and I want to go back to number 2, unit 2, which is this one. Here we are. All right. So here's a child born tonight. Okay. Now I've changed the wheel style. So now you're just seeing the house cusps. And the signs are inferred. You have to figure out by looking at the outer ring, where does Virgo start? Where does Virgo end? It's invisible. You do it in your mind, and after a while, you get used to that. All right. So now, this is a child born in Pittsburgh. Now watch if this same child was born in Oslo, Norway. Same minute on Earth. Okay, we're going to rectify this. No. We're going to... rectify this. And it's not going to help me. All right. Well, I can't find the button right now. Well, if we were born in Norway, these, you can see my cursor. I can't find the right button. If you were born in Norway, these lines would be, this fourth house might be tiny. And the fifth house may go from here to there. They're real big and are real small because the earth is so tilted. Okay? The houses get more irregular as you approach the poles. So let's think about what that means. Why do the houses appear real small and why do they appear real big? All right, now. Let's see. All right, here's what I want. Okay, here. You don't see it. All right, now bear with me, and this will explain a lot to you. When you're dividing the houses, you can choose between one of several different house systems. The house systems in this famous software, popular software called SolarFire, are Placidus, which is the most used by astrologer. The second most used is the Koch system. Some people use Campanus. Some very famous astrologers use Regiomontanus. Well, what the hell does that mean? Okay, those are the names of very famous mathematicians, trigonometricians, or philosophers of their time. And what they did, they loved to argue, they argued about if that point is above me in space and that point is rising, that's where sunrise is, and it's the constellation there, and that point's above me, then how do we divide the other part? Because you want 12 houses, and that only gives you 4. So they argued about time and space. So Regiomontanus and Placidus and Koch, they're all different systems. They all have their own truths. They're just different ways of dividing the sky. The second house starts here. This guy says, no, second house starts here. This guy said, no, it starts here. Okay? So I use Placidus. I've used Placidus all my life. Almost everybody does use Placidus. There are many people who argue for Koch, etc., etc. They all have their own truths. I don't argue about it. So when I look at a chart, the houses are separated. Remember, in Norway, in West Virginia or Pennsylvania, the houses look pretty similar. It takes the sun the same amount of time to go through each house. In Norway, there's houses like this, there are houses like that. If you're born near the North Pole, there are houses like that. Babies are born near the North Pole. It takes the sun forever to go through a certain house into North Pole and then goes through other houses real quickly. That's all it means. That's all a health system is. How are we going to divide up what was 4 chunks into 12 chunks? So for now, we're going to use the Placidus method. And this is the final book called The Table of Houses. So let's review. The child's born at 8:10. It's 1:10 in the afternoon there. We've gone plus 1:10. We adjust that figure a tiny bit for imperfections. Won't get into that now. We look up the sidereal time for that moment of birth at noon in England. We write down the sidereal time for noon in England that day, and we add or subtract depending whether our interval is positive or minus. So now we know the moment the child is born what the exact sidereal time is in England, not south of England, not west of England, in Greenwich. So we look up our city. Our city says you're 5 hours and 20 minutes different. You subtract the exact time difference between your city and Greenwich. Now you come back. Now you've got the exact local sidereal time for your longitude. 75 for Philadelphia, 80 for Pittsburgh. Now, where's the latitude? This is when people tilt. You can even turn your sound on and listen to it. You can listen to the sound of tilt, tilt, tilt. This is where you look up your table of houses. This gives you the final answer. There's a final answer. So let's say, for example, one of my listeners has 5 degrees of Scorpio at the top of the chart. See the 2 columns I'm holding? 4 degrees Scorpio, 5 degrees Scorpio. Okay? I've got a sample chart ready for you to see. It's not the same one we're doing, but just to give you an example. You've now got the right sidereal time for anybody born on that longitude up and down the globe. A straight line through Pittsburgh all the way to the South Pole. Anybody born on that pole, you got the local sidereal time correct, but you don't have the right latitude. So that table of houses, this atlas tells you what the longitude and latitude is of every town in the country. Or you can get it from a map or different things. Then you go to, here you go. This is where people lose their mind. Okay. I've got an annoying graphic right in my face that I can't seem to get rid of. That's what my holdup has been. So you see, in this example, let's say in the example, let's say you do all your mathematics and you're all done, and you come back with 112 something. Well, here's 19 Aries at 110, and here's 20 Aries at 113. My calculations have told me that my final answer, my sidereal time, is 112. Well, if it were 110, I would have 19 Aries on the midheaven, meaning I'd also have 19 Libra at the bottom, the opposite. Okay? I'm somewhere in between 19 and 20. Okay? So I come down this column. It's somewhere between all the factors here and all the factors here. It's somewhere in between the two. So this is where you got to do algebra, or you got to do logarithms, and there are other methods too. So we know that the 19th degree midheaven has all these numbers. The 20 and the 21st have these numbers. We got to figure out what's in between. So by looking at the table of houses, we have to go down to the 40th parallel. Here's the 40th right here. And I draw a line in my book because I'm always dealing with the 40th. Here's the 40th parallel. And so if I determine that I'm somewhere in between this and this, it tells me the ascendant is between 237 of Leo or 322 of Leo. And I know I'm born halfway through the day, so I would average out between this factor and that factor. I'm not going to belabor this because this is mind-blowing. You'll notice this one is for the sign. This is the sign of Taurus, 25.1 Taurus, 0.6 Cancer. So you'll notice it gives you 5 houses, and the 6th one is the midheaven. So what happens is you come back with your local sidereal time, and you never end up perfect, so you're always in between 2 dates. So you have to average between this one and this one, and you can use fractions in algebra, or you can use logarithms, which is even easier, but it's confusing. And the result is, it comes back and it tells you precisely where all 6 of your houses are. The other 6 houses are exactly opposite. This is the kind of stuff we went through for one chart. We haven't even touched the planets yet. All right? So yes, it's maddening. Like this thing in my face is. I can't get this off my screen. Anyhow. So we take a look at this moment. So what you would have if this child was born now, and this doesn't even tell you the local sidereal time. I used to always do my chart and I would write the final answer. What is the local sidereal time? Here's the latitude, 40. Here's the longitude, it's almost 80. It's 79:59 west of Greenwich. And the sidereal time tells you how to look up your houses. This time the computer does it for you. So if I were to switch this Pittsburgh very quickly to Atlanta, you would see all these houses change. Okay? Let me see here. Notice how it's 056. 056 is rising right now. All right, I'm going to close this out, and I'm going to change. I'm going to change this to Atlanta, Georgia. Atlanta. All right. Look at the difference. Now it's 20 degrees rising. Between 2 babies are born tonight. When this show started, one was in Pittsburgh, one was in Atlanta. One's got 0 degrees of Taurus rising, or whether it was 0 degrees of Gemini, I think, 0, and one is 20 degrees of Taurus. So they're 10 degrees different just because you're on a different part of the globe. Okay, now the hard part. Now, the ephemeris tells you, in other words, here's where the logarithm comes in. We know that we are born 6.62 percentage points through the day. Let's say you're born at midnight. You're born 0.5% through the day, half a degree. That factors how you factor in your difference in house cusps. Now, this book tells you, well, Mars was at 1 degree today, and it was at 2 degrees tomorrow. Or Mars was at 1647, and tomorrow it's at 20 point something. You're given a start and a beginning of where the planets were. Now you've got to calculate what the midpoint is at the time of birth. We got to figure out where was that planet at the time of birth, given that you know where it was yesterday at noon and today at noon. So you got to do it with all your planets. And once you got all your planets adjusted, then you put the planets on a circle. And that's all being done in a split second when you push one button. That's what's happening. And the purpose here is not to drive you nuts. It's not for you to memorize it. It's to show you what's happening. And I'm going to tell you why we do it here in a minute. I've had people give me charts. Oh, I got this done by Uncle Harry, and here's the chart. No, it ain't right. Well, this is the chart. No, it ain't right. No, it ain't right. Why do you know it's not right? Well, you told me you're born at noon and the sun's at the bottom. How can it be right? You said you're born at sunset and the sun is on the left. That's rising. So the chart ain't right. That's the advantage of doing it by hand. You understand. You're not taken. You understand what the chart's supposed to look like. Okay? You wouldn't believe how many times Liza and I are working on a chart and we say this to a person. They go, no. You're going, blah, 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 and there you go. No. You go, after a while, you're just not that far off because we've been around too long. We've done too many charts. So what we do is we take the AM and we switch it to the PM. Again, you did this. Yeah. And then charts like this. Yeah. That's what was wrong. Somebody wrote down the AM, PM wrong. Some people get charts back. Get this now. Some people get charts where the AM and PM are both circled. Then what do? You get all kinds when they're all around the world. What you do there is you do an AM chart, you do a PM chart. Then you start asking questions that pertain to the transits going through the AM chart, the transits going through the PM chart, and after a while, only one of them makes sense. Okay? For example, there are about 7 known charts that are pretty famously done for the United States. The United States is born at 1776, July the 4th, but we don't know what time. There are articles written, there are notations made, there's evidence that Franklin and Jefferson were both astrologers, that we were started propitiously at a specific moment to take advantage of the planets, which is really a jive thing to do because you can't take advantage of what God's already got planned for you. And they found that out later when, what did you add to the chart? The original United States chart had Sun through Saturn. Well, right after the revolution, along came his planet Uranus. Boop, you got to add Uranus to the chart. Oh, look what that did. Then 1800s, boop, you got to add Neptune to the chart. Oh my God, look what that did. 1930, boop, you add Pluto to the chart. Pluto's opposite Mercury. So here's your 1776 chart with Mercury well placed, right? Which is our mind and our communications. It's 1930. There's a new planet. Well, where was the planet on July 4th, 1776? Boop, it was right opposite Mercury. Now we got problems with Mercury. So that just shows you can't fool God. You can't do electional astrology. I'm going to do it smart. I'm going to get married exactly at that moment, and we're going to end up getting along great when, in fact, we really don't. You can't fool it. Something will happen. You cannot do it. The preacher will be late. Somebody will fall down. Somebody read something wrong. It will not work. You're part of a quantum universe and you can't do it. So anyhow, what we really did here is we took from this book what the sidereal time was on the day you were born in England for that day. It's if everybody, all kind of kids were born on that day around the globe, all astrologers during that day would start with that figure. What's the star time in England? You took your birth time. If, say, you're born in China, you would go the opposite direction, 17 hours earlier. So you'd have a big interval that way. So you find out the interval, and all the interval is how much time has elapsed past noon or how much time before noon are you. You put the little mathematics together, and you end up with an interval of difference. You take the sidereal time that's given in the book, you subtract or add according to what sign is inside that box. Now you got the sidereal time at the time of birth in England, but you don't have it for your longitude and your latitude. So you've gone to England because you're 5 hours different, but you see, Philadelphia's 5 hours, we're 5 hours and 20 minutes. They're different. And 20 minutes causes a lot of change in the chart. Then you subtract, here in the West, we subtract this time difference between our city and Greenwich, England, to come back, and now we know the exact sidereal time for your time of birth, but we don't have your longitude yet. I'm sorry, we don't have the latitude. You look in the latitude in this book. I haven't touched these books in 15 years, so that might make you feel a whole lot better. Okay, because you just do it all by touching buttons. Eventually, in a long course of astrology, you have to know about this stuff. You just have to know, because one of the real reasons is this. In the old days were the better days. Here's the reason why. I just got a letter from a lady on Facebook. She says, I have the chart you did for you and my family in 1980. I lost all my charts in the flood. All of them. She says, I remember you sitting at my kitchen table with your reference books, and you had a pen that was red and black. And you would plot these circles, you plot the little houses, and you put them on the circle, and after you'd put 2 planets on there, you get your ruler out and you draw with black or you draw with red. I would draw the squares and the oppositions with black and the trines and sextiles with red. That was just my choice, my standard. I marked around the circle where the houses started and ended. I got my chart done. When I went on the radio on the weekend, I had 1 minute, so I would just quickly throw up the chart, not even mess with houses, and I'd just throw up a chart or have a blank and just put the planets on there real quickly from this book. Then I could quickly see what's opposite, what's square, etc. And I had to work very fast to learn where the planets are now. So that's what a good astrologer does. A good astrologer meets you on the street and knows where the planets are in their head, and they're talking to you, and they know whether you're going through a whole lot or not already. So that's how it's done. If you do want to do it, matter of fact, you cannot get a certificate. You cannot get the professional certificates of the big organizations in any country unless you know how to do all this by hand. You'll notice there's no initials by my name because I don't need it. Now, when I work with my chart or my loved ones, I did it to the nth degree, and just to stay sharp, I calculated it down to the minute. And then when I would order my chart from ACS in California, I would come back, get the chart back, and it would be within 1 minute if correct, which made me good. Today, when I do it by hand, I've got this wonderful program called Celeste, okay? So if any of you have an iPhone or an Android, you can go to alabe, ALABE.com. I don't know why I'm wearing glasses. I always take them off. alabe.com, which is the American distributor for Solar Fire. Solar Fire is out of Australia. And you can download, let me just show you. A little button. It's tied to the internet. That's where the planets are now. I know we're getting glare problems. That's an accurate chart. Totally done. Totally done for where I'm sitting. That fast. Free. So, if you're running an iPhone, you can go to A-Lab and just click on Celeste, products to download for free. Celeste, it will install in 1 minute and you're up and running. Now you can only run one chart at a time. It'll remember another one, but then it forgets it. It only remembers one while you're doing one. I use it sitting in the chair watching TV. I do hundreds and hundreds of them. Because I look up people. Every time I see a gravestone, I see a birth date, I go, boom. And I learn by watching. Now, they have another program for sale called Astro Gold, which is just a few bucks, maybe 25 bucks, which you can buy, and it allows you to save all your friends. And you mix them together, two together. So you can get Astro Gold from them. If you have an Android phone, they have what's called on their system a beta version of Android. It runs just fine. It's free also. There are also other places on the internet that have very nice, quick, free services, places you can log into, get yourself an account, and they will save your charts for you, etc., etc., etc. You will notice, I'm not sure exactly why, Astro Theme is really good. I use Astro Theme all the time for thousands of charts for the most famous people in the world. Also, Lois Rawdon's website, which is called astro.com. Lois Rawdon was, yes. Lois Rawdon is passed away. She was a very famous Gemini astrologer in America, and she made it famous to categorize how accurate is that birth time. It's called the Rawdon scale. We know that for sure since Obama didn't have one and he snuck it in from Kenya. We don't know about his. Got thrown away. Okay, but there's ratings A, B, C, D, doubtful. From the mother's lips. How did you get the birth time? From the birth certificate, from family stories. Is it unknown? And an awful lot of charts that you're going to do, it's unknown. You don't have birth time. And I suggest through the years here that when you don't have the birth time, to use noon, because noon represents the day. And I've done enough of them that it's a pretty good reading. But the problem when you don't have the birth time is you don't know what houses any of these planets really reside in, and you don't even know where the moon is. Sometimes the moon's at 29. Well, you don't know if it's in this sign or in the next sign because it moves 13 degrees in one day. Well, when you work with it for a while, you can tell. Anyhow, you can get Celeste for Android or for iPhone. You can do a lot of different systems to get charts done. You don't have to wait for a week till your chart comes back. And in the old days, we used to use the Timex Sinclair, little tiny black computer, little tiny thing that had a 2K extension. You could extend it 2K. Plugged in the side, typed in the little stuff. Wow, out came the chart on a little piece of, like a receipt. Woo! At least it had the placements and you could take them and copy them to your paper. Then came the Commodore 64, and then it came and you had all kind of little graphics and stuff. Then they started doing all the aspects between planets and all that and all that. So, why have I driven you nuts and lost half my crowd already? Because you need to understand what's happening. So in the old days, when we plotted a planet on the chart and we drew the aspects, you got a flavor for what was happening. Then you would put in Saturn. You go, wow, because you worked from the beginning out. Then everything changes because you put Saturn. And as you nervously get to the end, you start to put Neptune, you start to put Pluto, and you're, oh, what's going to happen now? Oh, you just put Pluto right next to my moon. So you get a real flavor for the chart, an organic feel for the chart. And people that know how to do astrology by hand won't be surpassed. They just, in general, are better astrologers because you have the understanding of how the earth's moving, how the skies and heavens are moving around you. So I'm going to stop there and try to revive you. And I didn't see any of the chat, but I'm going to take you off and unmute all. No, I won't do that. I'll mute all. If you would like to ask a question on how to do this, raise your hand and I will unmute you and try to help you. Who's still awake? Carolyn's still awake. Who's got a question? Carolyn? Okay, you're on.
Oh, hi. Yes. So, have you ever seen this book?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Well,
Very good book.
Is it?
Yes. I've had to do a lot of research because I've taught so many classes. I was always looking for the best one to start with. Always looking for the best one to start with.
Right. Okay.
Start them all with the exquisite zodiac.
Say that again.
Start all students if they want just the signs only. It's not about other stuff, but about the sign. You want to understand the signs at the heart, get the exquisite zodiac, which is blocked behind my lamp.
No, I do. I have your book.
Oh, it's good about the signs.
Yes. Okay. I have your book. I just moved from California to Las Vegas, so I'm kind of in a state of flux right now. But yes, I do have your book. And when I saw that you were teaching this class tonight, I was like, I'm not going to miss this. I'm something I've wanted to do.
Do you have a little bit better understanding on how a chart's done now?
Oh, absolutely, because
it's not easy.
Oh, it isn't. That's why I've never opened up this book before. I mean, to actually look on in the back here with the charts and the. Yeah. I was just like, oh, you got to be kidding me.
In my day, there was a book called The Complete Astrologer, which was spelled complete, Compleat, by Derek and Julia Parker, still with us out of Australia. And they were kind enough.
Oh, what she's showing you? She's showing. Is that it?
Well, she was kind enough to write the foreword to this book here. But
Marcia.
Yeah,
Marcia was.
Yes, that's right. It's an excellent book to start with because it's got a brief ephemeris inside. It's how I learned all the steps: subtract this, add this, etc., etc. Liza in there uses a book this thick on how to do the math. Well, she drove herself nuts, and I decided not to because it's hard enough to read the dang thing. Okay? But there are many, many books on how to do it. But basically what you're doing is you're taking your time of birth, you're calling your friend in England. Okay? He or she looks at the clock, takes the sidereal time that he's given at noon. All charts on the day you're born, all charts in the world are based upon that number that day out of Greenwich. Because nowhere else has the tables. The tables have to be done for one place. And the center of astrology, modern age, is Greenwich, England. So then you go through the time zone difference, the mathematical small calculation, then you bring it back to your town, to the proper longitude, Pittsburgh, not Philly. Then you go up and down a table of houses to the right latitude, and you read out the 12 house cusps. You put the 12 house cusps around a circle. You plot your planets on it. Plotting the planets is not easy because you know where the planet was at noon yesterday before the birth, and you know where it is today after the birth, but you don't know where it was in the middle. So that's why you have to use fractions or logarithms, which will nail it right down to it. But that's what calculating a chart does. Now, how you do it. Now, the other 95 years you got to spend is how to read one.
Oh, yeah. So I have a question. Okay, if I was born at 6:08 a.m.
Right.
and we've got a Greenwich time of 5:20,
No.
5 hours.
Where were you born?
I was born in Uniontown, Pennsylvania.
And I'm about 18 miles from there now.
Oh, really?
Yes.
It's a small world after
That's
all.
where my girlfriend's from.
Oh, okay. Yeah, anyway, I was born there, but my parents, the family's from Brentwood,
Okay.
right out of Pittsburgh. So we ended up moving back to the Pittsburgh area.
If you were born at 6:05, number one, everybody in the world tells me they were born at 6 in the morning, which means they don't know. Okay? Number two, the last person you ask is the mother, because the mother's in so much pain and she's so excited that she doesn't know the time.
Oh, no, they actually put it on the birth certificate or something.
The fact that you got 6:05 is probably very good because somebody's looking at it. Number four, you cannot trust the clock in the delivery room. When my child was born, I had my watch in sync with the Colorado atomic clock, so I was within 1 second of accurate. Then when the baby's being born, you got to say, well, is it when the cord's cut? Is it when the body's separate? Is it when the child cries? When is it? So I got it within 1 minute. So your question at 6:05 is what?
Well, I would just am I subtracting the 5 hours and
you're
20 minutes?
You're born in Uniontown?
Yes, Uniontown.
Okay, 6:05, it's 5 hours different. Now remember, there's daylight savings too. What's your birthday?
September 9/9.
Okay, so you don't have daylight savings. All right. Well, you are in daylight savings in September, but in your year, did you have it? So you got to determine whether it's daylight savings or not. Let's say it's not. You add 5 hours. You were born at 6:05. You end up with an interval. You end up being born in England. You call England. It's 11:05 in the morning. Right?
Okay.
In your box, you have a minus 45 minutes. I'm sorry, a minus 55 minutes.
Minus. Okay.
Minus. Then you put it through that little factor, that 1/6 factor. So let's say it's a minus 58 minutes now. Then, very simply, you write down the sidereal time given to you for September on that birthday. You subtract, because the box says subtract. Now you know, because you were born 55 minutes England time before noon.
Okay, I got you. I'm following.
But it's England time.
Right, I'm following. I got you now.
Okay, so now you know what the Greenwich Mean Time was when you were born. You take the sidereal time, you subtract that minus 55, you've got that Greenwich Mean Time. Now you've got to find out the time difference between Uniontown and London. It's going to be around 5:20 because it's pretty much south of Pittsburgh, right?
Yeah, yes.
Then you subtract the 5:20 to bring it back. So now the 11-something turns into 6-something. So your final local sidereal time for time of birth in Uniontown is around 6-something. Then you look on your latitude, which is going to be about 38, 39. You go across the 39th parallel, because Wheeling's at the 40th. And there's your answer. Now, when you use a computer, thank you, Carolyn. When you use a computer, it's got all this stuff done for you. Other questions from anybody that's awake? Yes, Erica, go ahead.
I was wondering, why do you use the 40th parallel?
Because it goes right through Wheeling.
Oh, okay. So it's not an astrology thing. It's just personal.
Wheeling just happens to be 40/80.
I see. Okay.
We get very lucky. 40/80 is almost exact. See, you don't have to get this precise unless two things. Unless your rising sign is 00 or your rising sign is 2959, and you really want to find out which one it was, in which case you're not going to get it anyway, because nobody knows exactly what second you're born. Then you start looking to the
Well,
person's
in my
mate.
case, I'm not. Can you hear me?
Barely.
I think I'm frozen.
I hear you.
My screen just froze. I've got a funny internet connection. Well, there's no point in doing that for mine because mine is really just approximate. It's 5:30, and
Never,
I mean,
never believe somebody that's approximate. Never believe somebody to think that it might be in the afternoon. Never believe somebody from the pendulum. Never believe a psychic that said this is when you're born. Don't do it. It's not worth it because you can be putting information into their head that might be 25 years wrong.
but my chart pretty much supports, things that have happened in my life. So it's got to be, it's pretty close, I would say.
Now that's interesting because that's the advantage of houses. Because when you have the 12 houses all constructed and you see a transiting planet that's about to hit the marriage house and you get married 2 months later, well, you probably got married when the planet was on that house. So then you can adjust the chart. Say instead of 605, maybe I was born at 621. Then you adjust the chart and all of a sudden all of your factors fall together. Like I was saying, America's chart, I finally, after 42 years, I finally have settled on the Sagittarius rising, the 5:15 in the afternoon birth time for America. And I used a different one for many years. But working with the new one is incredibly accurate because you put up the 5:15, and I'll do this some night. I will show you America's chart and I will plot what happened during 9/11, what happened during World War II, what happened during all these different famous events, Boston bombing, et cetera, election of this person, election of that person. And you'll see planets hitting these sensitive points in the chart. And the one that has Sag rising seems to be very accurate. I was using one for years that showed the America being born at 2:15 in the morning. And there are some reasons to believe that that one's true. Nobody knows, just like nobody knows the ultimate chart of Jesus Christ, let alone his birth time. So anyhow, any other questions? Thank you, Erica. Any other questions? Okay, announcements for the next few weeks. I will be back with astrology next week. The 26th will be Leanne Fortunato Heltzel out of the Youngstown area. Jordan, Linda, let's get you first. Let's get your question.
Oh, I just typed it. I just typed that I didn't have a question.
I don't read the chats.
I just said it was great.
Okay, you enjoyed it. I'm so glad.
I learned a lot. So we'll talk about it later.
I tried real hard not to bury you. Okay, 26th is Leanne, and Leanne's going to talk about working with clients. For example, they're starting a business, they're writing a book, and she takes them in a guided meditation to the book. She takes them to the quantum space where the book's finished. And it informs her what the title is, etc., what guidance. I can't go into it far enough because I'm not that talented with quantum energy. Yes. There you go. Great, Carolyn. Then November 7th will be Linda Veras, who will be talking about what she calls the rainbow. I forget what she called it, the magic rainbow? Yes, there's a question here.
Rainbow Bridge, maybe?
Yeah, Rainbow Bridge. Right.
I wanted to ask you what the name of the book was that had all of the aspects related to like different parts of the body, and
I
you
don't
said
know.
it was a very old book. It was couple of weeks ago.
Oh, you're talking about Rex Bill's book.
Yes.
Yeah, just look up Rex Bills, REXBILLS. And it's got all the parts of the body related to everything, you know. What part of the body is related to what sign is related to buses?
Do you remember something about the title of the book?
It's sitting right near me. I can't read it from here. Rex Bill's all you need. He's famous for that one book.
But that was about like a 50-year-old book or something, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's quite extensive. You can tell he did a lot of research. You'll know for sure. I think it's called the Handbook for something.
Ah, thank you.
Okay, now, so November 7th is her. November 21st is the wonderful Linda Hill, who took the book I've been showing you, the red book, which is the Sabian symbols, and she took it and retranslated it. And that's where the blind lady in 1927 worked with the great astrologer Mark Edmund Jones, and he gave her 3x5 cards. It penciled in on each one in the back 1 degree Aries, 2 degrees Aries, 15 degrees Capricorn. And this psychic woman who was blind, he and she went into a park in San Francisco, and she gave an image for all 360 degrees. And yes, she was a Virgo, so she worked hard. And yes, she had Pluto and Neptune rising. So we know she had the ability. So anyhow, that book has been out for years, and it was translated in the 50s rather poorly by Dane Rudger, I think. And Linda Hill has come along from Australia and done a fabulous job. A masterpiece, I think. She's going to be here explaining all about that and some of the other things she does. And then again, I think first week of December will be our Reverend Greg Keene doing more psychic mediumship with you. Okay? Well, I didn't want to have to do it, but I had to do it, and it wore me out. That's how old that stuff is. But you don't have to, and you can go rulership book. You don't have to, because you can do the computer. Computer can do the work for you, and it's going to come up with a whole chart all at once, and you have no idea if it's right or wrong. And another thing you got to remember, when you use solar fire and you do like 10 or 20 charts, 30 charts in one day, it starts to make mistakes. See? That's when you know it's making mistakes, is when you know you understand how charts are calculated. When you don't, then you're prey. So what you should do, if you're doing astrology charts and do 20 or 30 of them on solar fire, reboot the program. Okay? Reboot and you'll be okay. Any final questions? Off and running. I thank you all so much. And I also, Tilt, she said Tilt. Okay. I also hate to turn you over to the current news, but when you turn off Astrology Unplugged, that's what you're left with. Don't suffer too much. Watch the news like this. Good night, everybody.